Welcome back to another episode of our series, Driven to Distraction. Today, we're tackling a topic that affects every single one of us more than we might realize: media distractions. This episode is media overload because whether it's a constant scroll of social media, the flood of news updates, or the allure of endless entertainment, these distractions aren't just stealing our time, they're shaping our thoughts, emotions, and even our spiritual walk with God. But let me make this clear. This isn't just about cutting down our screen time. It's about something much deeper: reclaiming our focus and aligning our hearts with God's purpose and breaking free from the noise so we can truly hear his voice. We're so thrilled to have a special guest with us today, Sway Gonzalez. Sway is an audio engineer and entertainment professional who brings a unique perspective to this discussion. He'll be sharing his experiences with media, both as a creator and a consumer, and the lessons he's learned along the way about maintaining focus on God in the midst of it all. So, grab your Bible, a journal, or just find a quiet space to settle in. Together, we're going to dive into the impacts of media distractions and, more importantly, practical and spiritual ways to overcome them. So let's go get started. All right, guys, have you ever looked at a clock and realized that the hours have passed from endless scrolling or binge watching a show? Well, media distractions are so woven into our lives that they often take up the very time we intended to spend with God or family or even doing meaningful work. And so this is our focus today. This episode is media overload. And joining me is Sway Gonzalez. So happy to have you here. So can you share with our podcast family a little bit about yourself?
I'm originally from Los Angeles, California. And my family moved to Texas when I was a teenager. And I would say that I am at heart a Texan, 100%. And, I've always been into the arts and I've always been into music and anything that's art related. And so that's what I do now. I've been a worship leader, a musician, and now I mainly focus on audio, and I'm an audio engineer, and I dedicate, just pretty much my entire life to art.
And guys, he's amazing at it. I've witnessed it firsthand. He is so good at what he does. And that makes it even more special for you to be here today because I know you're going to be great at this too. So I'm going to ask you a question. All right. It comes from this book. So guys, this is a great book. It's called Reconnect, but I'm going to put a warning on it. If you read it and you have children, you may never let them be on social media ever again. Matter of fact, you may never get on social media ever again. Again, it's Reconnect. And here it is. I'll put it in the resources. So good. Okay. So he asked a question here and I wanted to ask it to you because I thought through it as we were prepping for this. And it says, what motivates you to use social media or get engaged with news media, entertainment? Like, what is the driving force for you when it comes to those types of devices and media sources?
In my life, it's been a bit of an evolution, I think at one point it was definitely some sort of dopamine hit, that would I would crave it and I would want it and I would want to feel it, more and more. I think there's also been times where it's been more of a distraction where maybe I need to just forget about something. A lot of people have different ways of coping with things like that. And I have done that myself with social media or with YouTube or, maybe binge watching a show or something like that where you just want to forget
everything.
Things. Yeah, just, whether it's whether it's a day or whether it's something bigger, right? There's bigger things in life that happen. And that includes me. And, and then there's also just been times where it's going to sound kind of bad, but I just want to be lazy or I want to procrastinate or I kind of want to just ignore what's happening in life.
Yeah.
Not even forget, but purposefully leave it.
Not engage with it.
Yeah. And just be like, you know what? I'm going to waste some time so that I don't have to deal with it. I mean, it's a lie because obviously I'm going to have to come back and deal with it. But
Yeah. It sounds good at the moment, though.
yeah, but that's kind of where so there's just different reasons and motivations. I think it all depends on where I am in life or maybe even that day. But
Yeah. And I think the majority of people can relate with exactly what, like, I don't think there's any more things you could add to why we do it, right? We talked in the opener with Angela McNeil about the root. And I would say that's like, what's the root of the problem when it comes to distraction? Because distraction's not the root. But like you said, those are a lot of the roots. Like we want to ignore, we want to push back, we want to disengage, we want to forget. And so clearly social media and news media and entertainment, they create the perfect space.
100%.
And they're actually made to create the perfect space. So just to define these things in case anybody is not familiar. So social media, what that involves, and please chime in, this is pretty much from my perspective, is endless scrolling, liking, commenting, seeking validation, and comparing our lives to other people's beautiful and perfect posts. And the danger of this, unfortunately, is that it does foster this cycle of comparison, this cycle of maybe less than. And I was thinking about, like in scripture terms, it really does directly oppose the words found in Christ in Philippians, which is he goes, I am not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content in whatever circumstances. We are not a content society anymore.
Not at all.
We're not even close to it.
Mm-mm.
And I'm not sure where we messed up, but I know Amazon's a part of the problem. And get this. So did you know this? Did you know that the average person spends 2 hours and 31 minutes daily on social media platforms?
2 hours and 31 minutes.
Average.
Daily.
It's an average.
Yeah, it's an average.
It's an average. I know people who do a lot more than that.
Yeah. I mean, just thinking about that, I'm like, there's so many more, there's other things you can do with 2 hours and, 2.5 hours.
So much more. But there are a lot of people who spend hours and hours and hours. I know somebody who has problems sleeping at night. And so they get on at like 9:30 and stay on to 1 o'clock in the morning.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And just, yeah, it's cool.
Well, I think that's probably part of the reason why they can't sleep.
I wonder. It could be. So, and we'll get it more into these a little more detail, but then there's news. Okay. And so what that involves is the overconsumption of news cycles. Mm-hmm. News back in the day when I was a kid, you had 3, 5, and 10. It came on at 6 o'clock in the morning, 5 or 6 before Wheel of Fortune. I know that. It's grandparents that watched it. And that's in like lunch, like a lunch break. And that was it. You had a newspaper, and if you wanted to watch the news, that's when you plugged in. But thanks to cable and the internet, you can watch news now 24 hours a day.
Well, and it's not just watching news, right? It's there's constant notifications, there's different avenues, there's opinions on news, there's opinion on the opinion of someone of the news. So it's you're kind of getting it from all different types of ways, right? You're reading it, you're seeing it, you're hearing it. It's on social media apps. It's everyone has their own app and they send notifications. Yep. It's it's not like you're waiting to read a newspaper the next day about what happened.
To find out what happened the previous day. Yeah, we are there for it. And what we see, and I don't want to like hit a hot button, but I think the best example was this past election. You see how these outlets, all of them, spark fear, anxiety, anger, excitement. I mean, if you ever really wanted a picture of what the news does, watch in an election year. I mean, we just witnessed it. And it's not enjoyable. It was not. I couldn't wait for it to be over with. I was so sick of all of it.
It feels like it's been in an election decade.
It has been. And it's just starting. So it's going to get worse before it gets better. And the deal with news is that while we're staying informed, and that's important, like I would say there are some things that are better to know in the moment than the next day in the newspaper. I'm not going to lie and say that I don't feel like that's important. But obsessing over it and thinking we can change it, I think it takes away from how well we trust in God. Because we're constantly flooded with here's the problem and here's this and what are we going to do? And then you, like you said, and there's the opinion of this side and the opinion of that side. And then you have my favorite people, which are the conspiracy theory people. And they have a whole different perspective of life in general.
It is fun to listen to them though.
It is, but it doesn't go with that good reminder in Matthew, right? This is, let's not worry about tomorrow.
Sure.
Let's worry about every minute and tomorrow and next week and next year and the president after this president. Like, let's worry about it everywhere. And so a fun statistic I found here was with Pew Research. It said that 55% of Americans feel overwhelmed by the amount of news that they encounter. That's half are overwhelmed.
Yep.
But they keep going back.
Yeah, I think there's so many double-edged sword things, right? Like, it's good to be informed. It's good to be up to date with what's happening. Burying your head in the sand is not necessarily a good thing, right? But we definitely let things consume us, and that, I think, that can get into something where it gets a little dangerous. And I think sometimes we also maybe replace God with a political figure or something, or like we might think like this person's going to make it all right, when in reality, that's probably not the case. You might think things will be better with someone, and they might be, but at the same time, there's no replacement for God and for what he should be, the focus of our lives. And so I do think that it's a double-edged sword. You want to be informed. You want to be up to date with things so that you are not, shell-shocked or,
right.
It might affect you. It might affect your kids or you or whatever. But you also need to make sure that is not your main focus in the center, because that's when things can get hopeless. And, I think over the holidays, I was having dinner with some friends, and the conversation went into like the state of our country and the state of our
that sounds like a really fun dinner that you had.
And it just starts going into all of these things, right? And then it quickly became a very hopeless conversation where everyone is doom and gloom.
Yeah. The whole world's ending.
Yeah, for sure. And then somebody, I wish it was me, it wasn't me, but somebody finally put an end to that and said, whoa. Like, there is hope. It's not hope in a president. It's not hope in a senator. It's not hope in an election. It's not, but there is hope. Our hope is Jesus,
Amen.
right? But it took someone to like literally snap us out of this ridiculous spiral of talking about all these things, right? So it's not that like knowing what's happening is necessarily a bad thing. I think it's just...
I think it's what you do with it.
Yeah, it's when we lose focus of what really matters, right? And at the end of the day, I think we can, chew gum and walk at the same time. We can be focused on God and also be informed, but just not allowing that information to overtake.
And I guess knowing where to take it back to, right? I think as human beings, we forget that unearthly realm, and we just put everything into the people here, the leaders here, the government here. And yes, we are called to pray for those people and follow by those rules, but ultimately they answer to a higher call. We answer to a higher call. And we just quickly forget. And I'll tell you, in all honesty, like I told you when you got here, I was like, oh, it's been a morning for me. And so I, as I'm doing all these podcasts in January, next week is a really heavy week for me. I have a lot going on, so my schedule is really tight. I've got a lot of stuff packed in. It was very manageable. And then all of a sudden, here comes this snow, sleet, storm again. And 2 Februaries ago, 3, I can't remember. It didn't go so well for us. We had busted pipes. We lost our kitchen. We lost our dining room. It wasn't horrible, like unmanageable. It was just a lot, especially for a family with a lot of small children. They cut our power off. We didn't have power for 4 days. Wow. So we were living by our fireplace. Neighbors, we were all cooking on gas outside. I mean, it was, looking back, it wasn't horrible, like I said, but it was hard. And it left like that little trigger spot, right? And so as I've been watching the weather, just to kind of be informed, not to be overstressed, but like for some reason the last 2 days, as it's getting worse on the spectrum, I'm starting to remember what that was like. And oh my gosh, how can we do better? How can we not have these pipes? Should we leave? Should we stay? And then it hits me, oh my gosh, they're going to let my kids out of school. And this is Houston, Texas, and nobody can drive on ice. And nobody knows what to do with snow. And so they're not going to put buses out. And I don't even want to drive on the road with these people when it's good weather. So I certainly want to do it in snowy weather or icy weather. Oh, that means they're here the whole week, my podcast. And so then I start emailing everybody last night that's supposed to be here, being like, can you call me tomorrow? Can we talk? Because I'm now trying to do a backup plan. So what happened is I let the distraction, especially this morning, really kick into overdrive. And I started trying to figure out how I was going to navigate and determine the weather and fix it and move it. And I called my husband who's traveling and I told him, he's like, what are you doing? You need to focus on today, Miranda. Like, don't you have some important stuff to do today? I'm like, absolutely. But what about these things? And you're not here and the pipes and the this. And he's like, settle down. And it was just that quick, right? It wasn't a bad thing. The weather's not a bad thing. It's good for me to know that my kids are going to be here for a whole week with possibly no power and ice and snow. That's great. But for me to freak out over it and go to the extreme in which I did, which I'm not saying that planning is an extreme, but in my head, there were lots. I was reenacting something that happened a while back and it triggered. That's excessive. And if that's what I do with weather, can you imagine? Like, I don't even watch the news. I'm not a news watcher. I get my news from my husband. He tells me what I need to know.
Well, I mean, we can't discount that, like, lived experiences are real.
Yes,
and
they are.
And scars are real and traumas are real. And so, you having a trigger from something that was, big deal a couple of years ago. I mean, that's normal, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's normal. But
it's what I do with it.
What do you do with it, right? I mean, even at church right now, we're talking about taking things to God and, how do we do that kind of stuff? And, I've had to learn to do that myself, right? Like, how to deal with some of these triggering.
Yeah.
Me, what I do is either I go for a walk or I call a friend and talk things through, or I combine them. I call while I'm walking, but, so we can't discount the fact that, like, there is something that triggered you, and there's also nothing wrong with you planning, right? Like, it's not bad for you to email someone and say, hey, we might need to change our plans.
Right.
That's fine.
Being considerate of I was trying to be considerate of their schedules as well.
Yeah. I think but
I may have let it
but you
jack me up.
But if it overwhelms you and all that stuff,
and
don't beat yourself up over it, right? Like, it happened. Okay, cool. We can move. You can recognize it, and obviously, your husband helps you and all that stuff. But in those moments, learning to take that kind of stuff to God. I mean, it doesn't seem maybe that big of a deal to someone else. Like, oh, really? You got triggered over some weather? Yeah. But, like, on a personal level, you're feeling it.
Yeah.
You're feeling
it's very
it.
real.
For you on a personal level, it's real. Yeah. So, like, okay, cool. This thing triggered something from the past. Well, like, let me take this to God. Let me pray. Let me, refocus myself. And then when you're a little bit more settled, then you can start planning some of these things,
Yeah. And that's definitely where I had to land this morning, was like reeling myself back in, going, here you are in the middle of doing all this research for distraction and talking about all these things. And boy, are you handling this beautifully? All that reading for nothing.
Isn't that how it always goes?
Yes, that is how it always goes. And then the other one's entertainment. And I can relate to this one, not as much, but like the binge watching. I'm not a binge watcher. I may have done it a couple of times. Just if I was stuck somewhere, like in an airport and I didn't have anything else to do. So binge watching, endless streaming videos. I'm not a YouTuber either, so it's not my thing. I think it's my age. I just don't, all that's not appealing to me. And then getting lost in gaming, which we've already talked about. And so here, I think the entertainment can feel harmless, right? There's nothing wrong. I'm just doing this to pacify some time, or I'm whatever the reasons, right? Or I like this show. I really am engaged. I want to do it. But again, it leads to idolatry, which is something God's really been put on my heart as I started studying distraction. He kept bringing up idolatry. And anything that's before him, more important than him, takes away from him is idolatry. And I guess my little narrow-minded mine, always just pictured idolatry as how I see it in the Bible. So these golden calves and the different ways that it's portrayed. But I never really thought about it as, no, it doesn't have to be a golden calf.
Sure.
It doesn't have to be a statue. It's things. It's anything, right? God gave us things, but he gave us things for us to rule over things. And in my opinion, things have started ruling over us. And that's what it feels like, is that we place the worldly pleasures above God's purpose in our lives. And I don't even think we realize it half the time.
Yeah, I would say that in entertainment, I'm guilty.
Guilty as charged.
Yes. Yeah, there's a few things. Music is one. Concerts, or even just watching musical performance on YouTube or something like that. I do love movies, and there's just something about like this big epic-y story that's being told that I definitely enjoy.
Give me more.
And then I am guilty for sure of like doing the YouTube thing where I'll watch a lot of, maybe some comedic videos or soccer highlights, tennis highlights, and I can definitely spend a lot of time doing that. What I find for myself is that if I have an extended period of time where I definitely like maybe a few days or a week or something where I'm really putting my focus on that, I actually do find that I feel a little empty inside. And even though I might use an excuse of, I laughed, or I, gained some knowledge, or I learned something, I don't know, but like I might
justify
You're
it.
justifying it. But I do find that like there, at some point, there's no meaning in a lot of these things.
Right.
It is entertainment. It is a distraction, and not all distractions are bad, but it is just a temporary feeling type of thing that, I do feel that I get the sense of I'm not fully myself.
Right.
And I know it sounds a little crazy and a little extreme, but it's true. I mean, if I'm eating well and I'm exercising and I'm in the Word and I'm praying, there's a better version of me when I'm doing that.
Absolutely.
Than when I'm eating junk food and just watching TV
Popcorn.
and just, like that. So there's a better version of me when I'm doing better things than when I'm not doing. And some people might say, well, it's not necessarily bad. You're right, but it's not necessarily good. And so
you're a better you. Yeah,
for sure. And so I definitely find that for myself. And, when it's cold outside and it's cloudy outside, I tend to maybe lean more on those things sometimes when I'm like, for what? Like, why am I doing that? Why can't I be a little bit more productive, right? Like, why am I going to go down an hour or two of, mindless YouTube videos just because it's cold outside?
Yeah. Just because I just don't want to get off the couch with my blanket. That's all.
Yeah. And I can definitely be doing something a little bit more productive. And that's not to say that you don't need those times of rest or those times of distraction or whatever. Like every once in a while is fine. I think it's when it definitely overtakes you, which it has happened to me, and I feel like, wow, my day is now gone. Because all I did was sit here with a little blanket because it was cloudy outside, and I watched 50 YouTube videos. And what has it done for me? Nothing. Now I feel unproductive, and I feel like I need to, actually, like, what am I doing with my life or whatever? When I should have really maybe taken some time. Yeah, sure, distract yourself for some time, because but extremes are what really will get you.
And you don't do social media anymore, do you?
No, I don't. Full disclosure, I do have an Instagram, but I don't.
Don't we all?
But I don't run my Instagram. I don't even have the password to my Instagram, so I can't even get on there. I have a friend who runs it for me, but run is a loose term because I don't give him any content to post. But no, I mean, I used to be very, for me, it wasn't even a comparison with Instagram. Like for me, this is going to sound so arrogant and embarrassing to say, I wanted people to compare themselves to me.
Oh.
So I would like constantly post.
Yeah, you wanted people to see what you were doing and where you were at.
Yeah, so I was like, I love going out and experiencing things.
Yeah, you travel a lot.
Yeah, I love this.
And
kind
for real,
stuff.
you have seen and been a part of some really, really cool things.
Yeah, and praise God for that, and I'm so happy that
Such a blessing.
I have been. But I would like, even something so small as like I found the coolest coffee shop, and look at this cup of coffee, and look at this, and and or like restaurants, or look at where I'm currently mixing sound, or who I'm doing it for, or whatever, right? Like it was this constant desire to have people like comment on that and be
impressed.
How cool are you? How awesome is that? Oh, what a life, right? And it's weird. Like there's also this pressure to continue to make it happen, right? Like sometimes I would not even want to go do something, but I would go do it because I'm like, I need to keep up I
got to give it to my people.
Yeah, like I need to keep that facade, that appearance of like, look at my awesome life, right? And so it just got to a point where it was super unhealthy,
right?
And even posts that were like meant to glorify God that didn't really glorify God, right? Like,
right.
It was like, I would maybe like post something about a church or something. Maybe I was at a cool church or something, but it would still be like, look at me
look where I'm at,
at this church, right? Like it was like, look at how cool I look on this console or with this microphone or whatever it might be, right? And then it was,
but I'm at church.
But but it was like,
yeah, I'm with God.
But all for him, And so it just, I don't know. There was a moment in time where I just reacted, and I was, I was just like, what am I doing?
I was like, what was the moment where you were just like, oh yeah, what is this?
The one moment that comes to mind, I actually got sick. And I was bedridden, and I would get messages from people asking me if I was okay, and they were asking me if I was okay because they hadn't seen me post.
Oh, so this wasn't like friends and family checking in on you.
Yeah,
this was your social peeps.
Yeah, so like my actual friends and family would take care of me, right? Like maybe bring me some soup or something.
Right. Stop by, maybe call.
But then these other people were just like, you haven't posted anything. And I was like, what the heck?
Yeah.
Like dance monkey type of feel, right? I'm sick. I'm like, what am I supposed to do? Just entertain you, right?
Yes, and actually you are.
And then I think that kind of was a wake up call of like, what am I doing? What I really, what's the purpose of all of this?
Right.
And I will say that now, I'm not on social media. I'm not on Facebook. I'm not on Snapchat. I'm not on, as the kids would say, the TikToks. I'm not on any of these things. I do have an Instagram, and I, every once in a while I'll get some content to post. But what's funny is that I actually still do a lot of fun and cool things, and the people that are in my life know about it.
Yep.
And the people that are not in my life don't know about it, and that's okay. And so, I was just having a conversation yesterday with someone, and like, what did you do, during the holidays? And I said, oh, I traveled. And he's like, where did you go? And, I did a trip to Europe. And I was like, oh my gosh, what in the world? I didn't know. And I was thinking about that. I was like, what an interesting thing, right? Like most people nowadays would just be posting about that. Right. Whereas I didn't. And that's okay. I was able to have this conversation with this person. It was one-on-one. I did share about my trip. I showed some pictures, and it was personal. Yeah, and it was actually way more enjoyable to have that conversation.
It was like relationship.
Yes. And so, yeah, for me, I'm like, I don't miss it.
I'm with you. I'm the same way. Especially try to keep my kids off social media, like on my posts. And I feel like if I wouldn't call you, so this is how I judge my posts. If I wouldn't call you or text you, or you wouldn't be calling and texting me and sharing that, then I'm not going to put it. I'm not putting it for a bunch of people I don't know. So like my stuff's just real that's vague. And occasionally if I'm doing something and it's something meaningful to me and it's just like, I don't feel like, I feel like I would share it with anybody any stranger I didn't know, then I'll post it. But if I'm not talking to you and you're not a part of my life, there's some things I don't want you to know. I don't feel like you need to know everywhere I'm going. And the hard part for me is though doing ministry work and everything leaning to that, right? Because I was off Facebook for like 8-10 years. It was the best move of my life. Didn't care anything about all that. And when I started the ministry stuff, I mean, that's where the audience, that's how you reach people, right? Mm-hmm. Just like church going online. And there are things that go along with that. And so I had to become comfortable being uncomfortable. And then where were my boundaries? And so I really try to think through what I post and who's going to see it. But it's draining. At the end of the day, I hate social media.
Well, boundaries is such an important word, right? And everyone has their own version of a boundary, right?
Yeah.
My boundary is this extreme, right? Like this is my boundary. I will not be on social media. That's
right.
just me.
Yeah.
Now, other people might be able to handle a certain amount of social media. You know, they might be able to. I
don't know. Based on what I'm reading, it's a no, Sway. It's a no. It's a no. It's a no. And listen to this. Here's my last statistics in this little thing. So for TV, people watch 3.1 hours of TV daily. That's of 2024. Okay. So I want to do some math. And a normal person probably has a 9-hour job because you got an hour lunch break you don't get paid for. So you're there 9 hours, even though you don't get paid for it. Okay. Add 9 and 5. What do you get?
Yeah, we're at 14.
What time are you people going to bed?
Plus sleeping.
Yeah. I'm like thinking to myself, what in the world what are you doing? And how are you having, like, where's your family in that? Where's relationship in that? Where's your time with God? If you're involved in a church, there's always church activities, right? Mm-hmm. Where is all that? And so an interesting article I found called The Problem with Our Perpetual Distracted Culture by Stephen Tobach says, we are not paying attention to anything anymore. Nobody is. We are all too distracted by our apps, our texting, our social media, our gaming, our commerce, our sports. We pay too much attention to anything that truly matters. We are distracted as a culture. No one is immune to the constant distraction of tweets, YouTube videos, Facebook posts, Instagram selfies, podcasts, Amazon purchases, TikTok contests, and streaming content. So that's a little alarming that we're just not paying attention anymore to nothing or no one at all.
Yeah, and I think we can see it, right? If you were to go to like a restaurant or a coffee shop and you're sitting there having a conversation with someone and you look around,
everybody's on a device.
Everyone's on the device, right? So like I said, over my holiday, I went to Europe. One of the places I went to was Rome. Nice. And I went to like some obviously historical spots like the Colosseum. And I'm in the Colosseum and it's amazing what you see. Like there are so many people that are more concerned about taking a selfie or getting the perfect picture of them at the Colosseum. Yeah. I saw some people getting upset with other people who might get into their picture. Yeah. I just saw a lot of like people that almost like, are you aware of where you are? Right? Because the distraction is I need to get the perfect post, not let me enjoy the place where I am, not let me live in the moment, not let me, have a sense of awe and wonder of this amazing, place that is so historically important.
Yeah, like I'm in the moment. When may you ever be back in Rome?
Yeah.
And what do you remember of it? Your pictures or what you saw?
Yeah, I'll probably never go back, right? Like this is probably like a one-time thing for me. And so you can definitely see it. You can definitely see it. It's just the distractions of this device in our hands, or the apps, or whatever it is. These distractions are real, to the fact that you can be in you can't even be in the moment.
Yeah. You're losing all the moments
when you're
I love it. In this book, Reconnect, he says, for devices and apps that promise to make us more connected, more efficient, more practical, they have trained us to weaken our relationships, miss important connections that are right in front of us, and be ineffective in everything we do. I mean, that sums it up. And what really, I wish I could just read this whole book to everybody. Let's do a podcast on read the book to you. Because there's so many things in here that are so good. Something that really stood out to me about technology, in which I almost feel like everything's hooked to technology now. I don't even know if I can separate technology. Like when I say technology, I don't just mean social media. Sure. I mean life.
Yeah,
okay.
For sure.
So what's interesting is that this book digs into research about the people who created all this, like the owners and creators of Facebook and Instagram. And I was blown away by how they talk about how the creators and the people who are like high up in these areas don't allow their children on social media because they know what it's designed for, and they know the dangers, the depression rates, the loneliness, and I guess I just never thought about this because why would I? But it goes into great detail about how every bit of social media is driven to either A, make you spend money, or B, consume your time. So like the little red notification dot, it's red for a particular purpose. It's red to irritate you so that you'll get on your phone, check it, get distracted by what it asked you to do, jump on something else, feed your information in, and make other companies billions and billions of dollars. All while also having bots and different things planted in there so that you get agitated and angry and create a stir, which creates trends and virals and makes you want to come back for more.
Yeah, I watched a documentary on that and how even they monitor how often you get on, how long you stay on. And if at any point you choose to lessen your amount of time on there, they have ways of getting you back. So they'll like
that's great.
Yeah,
that's wonderful.
They'll try to figure out a way to like pique your interest, and it's multiple things. It might be a notification on your phone. It might be an email. It might be, how else can we, what other roundabout way can we get to you?
Yeah.
In order
and it works.
Yeah. I mean,
it works.
I mean, they're pros at it, right? And so for sure, I mean, there's no way around you being on these apps makes them money for multiple reasons, right? It could be ads, it could be selling your information, your data, right? Like all that stuff, right? Like there's such an incentive to keep you on these platforms that if you disconnect, they're gonna find a way to reconnect you.
And they spend billions of dollars to make sure that they get you. And you're seeing it every day, every single day. So I'm going to look at Hebrews 12:1 for a minute. It says, let us throw off everything that hinders us and the sin that is so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race that is marked for us. And so my thought was, just as a runner sheds unnecessary weight, right? A runner doesn't run in a full ski suit because you're not going to be very aerodynamic in any of that gear. To stay focused on their race, they shed everything they need to shed. They consume, they train, all these things, right? We too have to identify and remove these media distractions, whether it's news, entertainment, social media, that hinder our walk with God. And so the thought is, well, why? Why is this a problem? And the first thing I thought about, I think will probably be the first thing I think about for all these distractions, is because of the impact on our relationship with God. I mean, isn't that what it all comes back to? That's where it bottlenecks.
Yeah, when I think about, obviously, the enemy will want to distract us from our purpose. And I think sometimes we might think that like it's just massive things, like this massive, temptation, sin putting in front of you, and you're like, oh, I'm not going to go there because I'm going to keep my eyes on God. But
run my race.
But it's more. The enemy's way more clever than that, right?
Absolutely.
He's going to distract us in many different ways. It doesn't have to be this massive thing, right?
Yeah.
He's gonna, he's gonna use something small, maybe repeatedly, or something that is not necessarily bad, but to an extreme, it can become bad, right? Like, just like watching a YouTube video in itself isn't bad, right? Like,
no, it's not a sin to watch YouTube videos. Well, I mean, I guess it depends on what you're watching.
Yeah, it depends on what you're watching, right?
Okay, the ones we're watching,
right?
Not a sin.
So, like, I'm watching a video that I'm learning some history or something, right? And that in itself isn't bad, and watching that video isn't a bad thing. But if I then get a recommendation and I stay on it, and a few hours have gone by, and then there's maybe an addiction to it, and this is where something that maybe wasn't bad or wasn't a sin then becomes a problem. And then it is now a distraction from what's important.
The better thing.
Yes. And so, like, we have to be super aware that it's not always going to be this sensational distraction. It could be something very small that will lead to something bigger, right? It's not like...
Yeah. It doesn't just start there.
It's not like the enemy's going to be super obvious every time. It's like...
Let me give you this addiction right here, right now. So watch the show and you'll have your addiction. Move on with your day.
It's going to be this...
It builds.
Yeah, this progressive thing that will eventually, accomplish what he wanted to do, which is distract us from our relationship with the Lord. And we all have to be vigilant for that. We all have to constantly reassess what's going on in our daily life to figure that out, right? Yeah. And it's not an easy thing to do.
No, and when I think about how it distracts my relationship with God on a personal level, and I know many people will be able to relate to this, so it affects my quiet time. And I don't mean just the time I'm sitting silent, which never happens anyway in my house, but my quiet time as far as either in the morning or in late in the evening. And I've heard many people, I've said this, well, I don't have time for Bible study every day. I don't have the time today. Well, I was going to do my quiet time, but then I ran out of time and I did my workout, or I did my this, or you fill in the blank, right? And so when media is a part of that, the time that your phone tells you now and keeps up with that tells you the time you could have had. I can't tell you how many times I look at it for a weekly average and I think, I got to do better. Now, I do spend the majority of my time on mine doing work because I have kids, and so I'm always hustling between things, or if they're in a sport and or they're practicing, they don't need my attention. So I rack up a lot of hours like that. But still, how can I justify I don't have time when it tells me I had a lot of time, right? And then research says that the most screen time hours, like the peak of it, are early in the mornings and late in the evenings, which is prime time when we should be settling in from the day and trying to reflect and turn some things from the day over to God. Or in my case, I found that mornings are better for me to start that way and then just circle back around at night and clean up the mess from the day and be like, Lord, help me. But I've struggled with that. And I have to constantly say, well, you have time for this.
So as a society, we're bookending our days with this kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I guess on a personal level, I would hope that I would bookend my day with God.
Yes.
Right? Like, wake up, pray, read the word.
But does it always happen that way?
No, not at all. Right? Like, I mean, I'm super guilty of like waking up and seeing, a YouTube notification and opening it up, right?
Right.
So I might not have social media in the context of like Instagram and Facebook, but I still have YouTube that distracts me, right? So, and that's happened a lot. I
sleep, do you know the notifications I wake up to? Like, I'm like, what do you mean there was somebody at my door at 9:00? Oh yeah, that was me. Like, what do you mean there? What, Sonic? So I got one before you got here, like, Sonic, come get your hot dog. Like,
that's a good one. Go get you a hot dog.
There we go, get you a hot dog. Well, now they're trying to make me go eat too much, like what in the world? But I would tell you, just really quick, that how I know how truthful this is. When this ministry started and I had to get back on social media, I didn't really know, I didn't have a lot of expectation for getting followers. That wasn't even my goal. It was just to be present, right? And I was praying through what I needed to do. And as like God was leading and the Holy Spirit was guiding, I stumbled across one night being a little too late to post, like 9 or 10. And for the most part on social media, we just try to put encouragement and funny things that Christians can relate to, right? And so I posted this one night at like 9:00 because it had been a long day. And I noticed that all of a sudden, and it was something, a more peaceful post, right? Like a more peaceful, settling, like God's got it, tonight rest, just something in that realm, right? And boom, all of a sudden, like I had all these views. And I went, that was weird. And so I thought, well, let's try it again the next night. Well, we're on night 2 years. And at night is when we get our most views. And it's always on those posts that are telling people it's going to be okay. God loves you. He's got you, and I've started switching to doing mini devotionals because I'm figuring if that many people's looking for our little small thing, then I need to give them something wholesome.
Yep.
Let me give you something to settle, maybe think on, maybe God stirs. And that's really been where we have gained our biggest following in our numbers was from nighttime visitors who are looking, it's quiet now. Nobody can distract me fully. I'm trying to sleep, but my head won't stop. It can't stop. And they're just desperately looking for something to calm them.
Wow.
And so I realized right then what holy moly, this is huge. Like so many hurting people and they seem to all be up at night. And no wonder we have medicines for depression and sleeping and not all that's driven by these medias, but it certainly is not helping. And we're spending hours at night redirecting to the wrong places. And so for me, my quiet time was most affected. And then in that arena of thought, the impact on mental and emotional health. The studies, again, this book, only read it if you want to know the truth.
No, yeah. And I think that you don't even have to study it. You just have to ask the people around you.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you see it, right?
Yep.
Like, it's not even like I have to do a deep dive. Like, there are so many people just in my own circle that
I like that.
That are struggling with these kind of things.
That's good. Yeah, again, this book is not a horrible womp. It's just factual, right? And it gives you something to think about. But it continually talks about teens and depression and how since social media came, the suicide rate in teens has increased, depression has increased, and then it goes into adults and how it's changed our mental capacity and our way to even interact with people, that we can see a post or a news story and what was going to be a good day turns into now a bad day. And now I'm huffy and puffy and I'm rude and I'm spewing out all because of what I put in.
Wow.
And so it made me think we really need to watch what we're putting in.
100%.
And it starts a lot here because unfortunately this is the world we live in. It is driven by social media. There are many other distractions and they're important and they carry their weight. But this one right now is really turning out rates of high depression, high anxiety, people going bankrupt, trying to keep up with people like you who have marvelous. I'm kidding, Sway. No, but that is happening. There are people trying to outdo the Joneses so that they get those views, which might turn into monetization. And right now with TikTok looking as if it could, get the, which who knows if it will or not. I mean, there are even people on there who are whining and crying about how am I going to live my life if if this is taken away from me. I'm like, go get a job.
And it's so funny because so many people think that what you see online is reality, right?
And it's not.
There's there's some places that'll rent out a private jet just for pictures.
Yeah.
So people will bring different outfits, right? Going
Like they've gone to different places.
Yeah, like I'm going skiing, I'm going to a beach or whatever, and they'll do this whole photo shoot in this private plane, and then later on they'll just post these things like
like from photos from other stuff, like
then people think like, wow, I need to get to that point where I'm on this private plane. Well, that's not reality.
Yeah, and they're going back home to their like 1-bedroom apartment with saving up for the next time they can rent something to look marvelous.
And I mean, so it's not all of it is a lie, but there's definitely not all of it is reality.
Well, let's be honest, nobody gets on there and really post the crappy parts of their life. Like never have I got on and took a picture of my house being filthy dirty with my kids running around and me hollering at them. How many posts do you see like that? Because that's really how I spend the majority of my days. It's not glamorous. My husband and I don't always like each other. We don't always have a picture perfect picture in front of a Christmas tree. I mean, sometimes we'll take that picture and right out of the shoot, somebody's mad and not happy.
You got to think about even thinking like back in the day, right? So physical pictures.
You had to go take them to Walgreens and have them.
But when you have the physical picture, even that wasn't always reality, right? Like how many
Stop
takes,
crying and smile.
Yeah, right. Like I look at some of those pictures of, my mom still has like, photo albums and stuff. I'll look at some of those pictures and I'll remember as a, man, before we took that picture.
Yeah, this is what happened.
It's like, so we've always done this, right? We've always tried to put our some sort of, face so that people can see, right? And now it's just more extreme because it's constant and it's daily.
And we're desensitized to it. Like it's normal. Do you notice how normal it is? It's not really talked about. Like you said, it wasn't the first thing talked about in your circle of, hey, let's get off this. It's so normal and we have accepted it and just taken it as this is how it is. This is how life is.
Well, nothing surprises us anymore, right? Because
nothing surprises me anymore.
Like I remember when I was a kid, like, and even a teenager or early 20s, there's things that would like, whoa, right? Like there was this sense of awe of different things. Now it's just not like that anymore. Now you're constantly in a state of consumption that something new is just something new, right? Like it's
like, oh wow,
it's
the
one
iPhone
more
5000.
thing. Yeah, it's just one more thing, right?
Yeah.
And then you're waiting for the next thing already.
Yeah.
Like what is the next thing that I'm going to consume? This is already so old.
Yeah, in 5 seconds.
Yeah, there's so
already a new
fast, and
it's crazy to move at that pace too. Just to constantly be trying to have the next thing.
Yeah,
whatever it is.
But that's just that's what we've been trained, right?
Yeah.
Like,
well, it's pushed on everything. So if you think about it, I mean, like in this moment, I'm thinking like social media pushes all the good. You need this, buy this, get this, private jets, ski trips. You should be looking like the Kardashians, right? And then the news is the bad part. You should worry about this, and this is going to happen, and the times are coming, and the world's going to blow up, and this person's going to lead us into horror. So that's all the bad, because I haven't seen a good news show and a good news story in a long, long time.
Well, it doesn't sell.
Well, yeah, nobody cares. That's the thing is we want all that so badly, right? And then like TV now, there used to be more, I would say when I was growing up, more wholesome family shows, but now we've completely got away from family being normal, right? And we're in a whole new realm, and I don't even know what that is.
Well, yeah, I would say family is counterculture.
Yeah.
I think traditional morality is counterculture at this point.
Yeah.
Wanting to be married and start a family and go to church and, that kind of stuff is almost frowned upon now.
Yeah, it's definitely pushed back.
But at least in my life, and I think in a lot of people would say this, that when you really do focus on those things and you focus on God and you focus on church and family and friendships, it's a way more fulfilling life than to be trying to live vicariously through someone else's posts that might or might not even be real.
Yeah. So if distractions are so harmful, let's move into how we can combat them. Let's let's just quickly move through that and look at some practical solutions. So number one, I think setting boundaries is important. I mean, clearly when you were growing up, your parents set boundaries and that was healthy. Boundaries are healthy.
100%.
You can set boundaries like limiting your screen time, limiting how much time you get on the news, watching to see how quickly you scroll more, right? You can replace, don't remove. So like maybe replace media with something else. I think a lot of times we feel like things are getting taken away from us and that makes us want to more. So like if I tell my kids, you can't do this, all of a sudden that's all they want to do. If somebody tells me as an adult, you can't do that, then all of a sudden I think about doing it a whole lot more. I mean, I'm sorry if I'm the only person, but maybe looking at it as nobody's taking it away from you, but what can I replace it with that gives me a better benefit? That's what I think, kind of like you were moving it from your life and replacing it with more authentic relationships and discussions. That's healthier. It's more prosperous. We're called to be in relationship with each other. So an example, for me, I completely quit listening to regular mainstream music. So I listen to worship music, or I'm doing things with my kids. I mean, clearly I'm not great at this. You'll catch me with my kids sometimes scrolling or doing something, but I have to try to catch myself and be like, no, you're in this moment, like be in this moment. So setting boundaries and then not restricting, but replacing. And then spiritual strategies for me would be like daily renewal, which is like having time with God. It doesn't even have to be some big drawn out 30, 45 hour minute, just making space for him.
Yeah, I think, the replace is such a important thing because, I don't know, let's put it into a different context. Let's say if you love fried foods, right?
I do.
And we all do. But you're overdoing it, right? And then you want to stop eating fried foods. Well, the solution is not just stop eating, right? Like you have to replace the food with something.
What are you going to eat instead of that?
Yeah, it's not like you can just stop eating completely. So I think that's super important because, and it depends on what you're replacing it with, right?
Yeah.
That can be good or bad, right? But like, so let's say you're watching, you're 2.5 hours, you're one of those people that are 2.5 hours on social media a day. Well, what would it look like to, maybe, all right, you get on there for 30 minutes and then what do you do with those other 2 hours?
Right.
Right. And not everything has to be like, it's not like, hey, you got to pray for 2 hours or read the Bible for 2 hours.
Yeah, go to church
for
2 hours. It's going to be you.
No, like there could be some practical things too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Like all of that is good. Why don't you pray a little bit? Why don't you read the Bible a little bit? Why don't you spend some time with someone? Why don't you talk to someone? Why don't you go for a walk? Why don't you...
There's so many things.
Yeah, like so like, it's not even a case that like we have to like overdo things, right? It's just like, how do we start moving in a direction little by little where that becomes less of a focal point and more of a, and more of just something that you might do every once in a while.
Yeah.
And it's easier said than done, obviously, because it is meant to be addicting.
Absolutely. And it is working.
And yes. And it is addicting and we've all been there. Right. And then you have to, just like anything else that's addicting, that's bad for you, you have to figure out a way to remove it.
And it's not quick and easy. I mean, the Bible points us to renewing our mind, right? In Romans. Daily renewing our mind. So I think this is a daily problem. This is not a one done, fix it kind of deal. Like, just like people go to certain programs for certain addictions, like, I'm not saying you need to go to like a social media program or a news program or whatever, but you are going to daily have to offer it up to God and be like, hey, this is my problem. And I need you to help me figure out how to move through this. I think accountability is good. And I think prayer is the best. Having somebody you trust that you say, look.
Accountability is huge.
Like, look, I'm close to you. You see me on here doing X, Y, Z, T. Like, I just need somebody that in the moment I can talk to. Maybe you can give me a suggestion, or maybe I can just tell you today I struggled and you can pray with me. I mean, when you don't have to answer to anybody, you normally don't change. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's just been my experience.
Yep.
Because... And then when all your friends are also doing it, nobody sees anything wrong with it. So you might need to find some new friends.
Well, there's been all kinds of like studies done, right? Like where if you tell someone that someone's watching you or there's a camera in the room,
Yeah.
like people act differently.
Oh
right?
yeah, definitely.
Like, yeah, I mean, if there is no accountability,
Yep.
then you're just gonna do whatever, right?
Yeah.
Because who cares?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, having someone that you can confide in, that you can trust, that you can lean on,
Yep.
right? It's not just like it's not just someone that's gonna, call you out on something for the heck of it. It's more like,
Right.
hey, someone that you can lean on, someone that
Yep.
you trust, someone that will help you.
Yeah.
I think that's super important to have that person.
Absolutely. It's good. It's good. It's good, because it's relationship again. It's iron sharpening iron.
100%.
Right. And that is huge. And then again, prayer plays a big role because you have somebody to pray with, somebody that's praying for you,
Mm-hmm.
and they know specifically where the devil is tempting and raging in your life. And
Yep.
so Philippians 4:6-7 says, do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, present your request to God. We have to take this stuff to God.
100%.
It doesn't come from him, right? But we can take it to him, and he knows what to do and how to deal with it. So here's what we've been doing. So we're offering a refocus challenge. Like, we're asking people, because we're bi-weekly now, to take time to sit on what we're talking about before we roll out another one to think on. And so this is what I came up with. My thought for a refocus challenge this week is to replace a daily habit with time in either God's word or in relationship. So identify this week where you see your time being consumed, right? So it could be binge watching, scrolling. Maybe it's having your phone at the table with your kids at dinner time. And don't just stop. I'm not telling you, don't do it. Just walk away from it. I'm asking you to see, what can you replace it with? So this week, pay very attention to what you're doing, what you're using, and then what can you replace it with? So there's lots. I'm like you. I walk, go have lunch with friends. I try to be really intentional with my time, and I'm not perfect at it, but I am getting a little better. So that's good. So let's quickly recap what we've learned today and what we talked about, and then we're going to wrap it up. So we've talked about how media distractions consume our time, our energy, and our spiritual focus. They also harm our relationship with God. They harm our mental health and our eternal perspective. We focus a lot on what's here and now instead of what we're here, what God put us here for, and what our mission is. Sway offered some really great tips on practical and spiritual disciplines that can help us move and shift, not take away so much, but replace, give something to refocus our time to, and to refocus on God. And so this week, my challenge, besides this challenge here of replacing what you're overdoing on your time, is to really ask you to evaluate your media habits this week. I think that's the biggest thing. Take the time to be intentional with where you're spending your time. Write it down, jot it down. And you don't have to feel ashamed or embarrassed or condemned by it. We all do it. But it's when we recognize and we get back in the game, that we can actually make change and do something about it. And then I'm always going to tell you guys to prioritize God first. He's got to be at the top. If God's not at the top, it just doesn't line up. It might look good. It might look like everybody else is lining up, but there is an eternal perspective we have to remember. It might be lining up here for people and it looks good and shiny, but what's the end game? Mm-hmm. So again, prioritize God first. When you put God first, everything changes.
100%.
Everything changes. So thank you for being here today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
I have enjoyed this conversation with you, and thank you guys for joining us as well. It's always a pleasure to be here. We hope that we've spoke something into you today, or we've encouraged you, or gave you something that was practical that you could use and take through your week in the next 2 weeks. As always, I'm going to invite you to come right back here in a couple of weeks and catch our next episode. So until then, guys, we'll see you later. Bye, y'all. As we close today's episode, let's take a moment to reflect. Media distractions are everywhere, and they pull at our time, shape our emotions, and even drown out God's voice. But the good news is, we have the power through the Holy Spirit to reclaim our focus and realign our hearts with what truly matters. This week, I want to challenge you with our Refocus activity. Spend some time identifying what kind of media distracts you the most. Is it the endless scroll of social media, the constant consumption of news, or the pull of entertainment? Once you've identified it, take intentional steps to replace that habit with time in God's Word, prayer, or building meaningful relationship with God and others. Remember Psalm 119:105. Your word is a lamp to my feet and a light for my path. When we choose to make God's Word the center of our focus, it illuminates every step of our journey. If today resonated with you, please take a moment to like, share, and follow us on social media. Sharing this podcast is one of the easiest ways to help spread God's truth to others who may need the encouragement. And if you feel led, consider supporting us financially to help this ministry grow and reach more people around the world. Every prayer, share, and donation fuels the mission that God has given to Stepping Forward Ministries. Thank you for joining us today. Stay grounded in God's truth, and we'll see you next time as we continue to step forward together. Bye, y'all.